We've just taken delivery of a box that is purporting to be fine china, but I'm pretty sure it contains seed potatoes. We had another box arrive on Friday, so I thought I'd spend a little bit of time going through the varieties we're growing this year and talk about how we try to achieve some early potatoes. We generally try to get our first new potatoes by the end of April, which is pretty good going. So what we do for our very first potatoes is grow in pots. So they're this size. This is a 15-litre pot, and I found that to be the ideal size for getting a modest crop of new potatoes. And you're not going to get a huge crop out of a pot like that, and we tend to just put one tuber in each container. But the whole idea with those is to get an early production. Now, in the past, we've then moved on to plant the rest of our potatoes in the vegetable beds as part of the rotation. This year, we're going to change that, and we're going to turn to growing entirely or mostly in pots. I say mostly because no doubt I will be tempted to plant some of these tubers out in the beds, because I think we've got rather more than we really need. But the idea is to plant even our main crop potatoes in pots, and we've got some 35-litre pots for those, rather bigger than this little fellow. Now, the end of April is a somewhat arbitrary target, but my wife's from Finland, and the last day in April is kind of a big thing there. It's Vaple. That's something that's celebrated in a number of countries, but not here. And there's all sorts of stuff goes on there. Of course, in Finland, they won't be getting their homegrown new potatoes for some time. The weather doesn't permit that. But Finns are crazy about potatoes. They really do love their potatoes. And so we try to prepare something typically Finnish for that evening. And so we like to get our own new potatoes, and we'll have some herring or smoked fish with them, and enjoy something that is quite typically Finnish. In a normal year, we might visit our local garden centre. We've got quite a good one nearby that usually has a great stock of seed potatoes and lots of the older varieties that I like to grow, as well as some of the more modern sorts. But this year, even if they're open, I'm not going anywhere. I've been pretty careful about not going out since March for health reasons, so I've had to rely on mail order. Now we very often do order some potatoes and by mail order, and this box has come from Jameson Brothers. I've ordered from them quite a few times, and always been very happy with what they've sent. This box here has come from Mr. Fothergill's, and I don't normally use the mainstream seed merchants, or just very rarely. But in this case, they had the other varieties that I wanted, so that was great. So this box arrived on Friday, and in there is, well, it's classed as a first early, but it's a little bit slower than some of the others. It's Pentland Javelin, and although that is an early potato, it's probably a couple of weeks later than some of the other varieties, and that's not ideal for our very first sowing. So I will use that one later in the year, probably outdoors rather than in the greenhouses. The early varieties were coming from Jameson, and I was a bit concerned about when they might arrive. So when we got the box from Mr. Fothergill's, I was wondering whether I would start off the chitting of the Pentland Javelin and use those this year, even though they are that little bit slower. But I just sent a quick email to JBA and asked them when they might be able to ship our order, and I got a reply back almost straight away saying, "Oh, pop it in the post today, you'll get it on Monday." And sure enough, here it is. So top marks for customer service there, and I'm very pleased that I can sow the varieties I had originally intended. So like with most plants, I do tend to pick traditional varieties, older sorts. That's just what I like to grow. This year I have got a couple that for me are a wee bit on the modern side, but I've also got some old classics here and a couple that we haven't grown before, so that'll be interesting. So in trying to achieve a particularly early harvest of potatoes, we have a few advantages here. For a start, we're in the south of England, so the climate is rather more amenable to early planting than it would be further north. We also have a more or less south-facing wall with a couple of greenhouses attached, and that makes all the difference to the environment. Now, we plant our first potatoes into the 15-litre pots and we row those up in front of the wall, just in front of the fan-trained fruit trees. And we found that offers more or less enough protection from frost. Occasionally we might drape a little bit of fleece over the top if we're a little bit worried about it. And I don't recall ever having any frost damage to our potatoes there. By the time they're above the soil level, the temperatures will have improved somewhat. And then it's the protection of the greenhouse and the wall that does the rest. We have had frosted potatoes where I've sown early into the vegetable beds, but even when that's happened outdoors, the potatoes under cover have still been fine. Right. Okay, so this one is Homeguard, and this one is relatively modern for me. This came out during the Second World War and was a very popular potato at that time. It's a first early, and that's one of the two that I'm going to be sowing in the buckets. We normally have two different varieties, and in previous years they've tended to be Sharps Express, Duke of York or Red Duke of York, and Epicure, all of which work quite well. I've not grown Homeguard before, so this is a new one for us. Then we have British Queen. Now, this one is a second early, so we won't be planting that straight away. That will go into one of the larger pots later in the year. So British Queen is a classic old variety, and the final variety should be Arran Pilot, which it is. So that's a first early, and I will be growing the Homeguard and the Arran Pilot in the 15-litre pots. Now, from Mr. Fothergill's, I have some very nice looking tubers actually. These do look great. I've got Pentland Javelin. So that, as I've said, that's another first early, but it's not quite as quick to produce the tubers as these other two, or I think that's the case. So I will save that one for later in the year. I then have Kerr's Pink. Now this is an old potato. I think it's of Scottish origin, though I understand it was rather popular, and maybe it still is, in Ireland. So Kerr's Pink should produce a good sized flowery main crop potato. I've never grown it before, but I'm hoping it's something like Arran Victory. That's one that we've grown before. That's also a main crop flowery potato with a great flavour. So this year I thought I'd try something different that I haven't grown before, and I'll be very interested to see how they do. The tubers look pretty good, so there's a few dinky ones in there, but not bad at all. And here we have a grand old potato. This is Belle de Fontenay, and as you can see, these are, we probably can't see, let's get closer to the camera, these are elongated tubers. This is variously classed as an early main crop, a main crop, or a second early, depending on who you're asking. I'd probably put it in the second early camp. So this is one of those potatoes that has a waxy flesh, and even when it's old, still tastes a bit like a new potato. And that's really quite handy to have amongst your main crop. If you like a waxy potato, obviously if you prefer the floury potatoes, then this is not the one for you. It's an old French variety, dates back to about 1885, and this one is going to be great. We do like to grow something like this, whether it's Belle de Fontenay or Le Rat or pink fir apple. That's another one that we really like. This has the advantage of being rather quicker than pink fir apple. I'm really very fond of that potato, but it is a very late maturing sort, and of course that puts the risk of blight rather higher. So it's not always going to get the opportunity to really bulk up the tubers before the blight might come. We don't know, but if you get a good year, then it's fantastic. But in a poor year, the tubers might be rather small by the time you have to cut down the haulms and rescue them. So all I'm going to do today is put some of these first early potatoes to chit. I'm using just some old egg boxes to stand the tubers up. And if you take a look at one of the tubers, you will typically find that on one end you can see a small scar where it was attached underground to the root, and the other end, which is known as the rose end, that has a preponderance of eyes, and it's those small crescent-shaped depressions, and you might see just the start of where the shoots are going to come from. It's those that are going to develop into the nice shoot. So I'm going to put those just in the egg box up the right way, and leave them in a normally lit room at room temperature, and they will chit just fine. I have on occasion seen people recommend putting them in a warm, dark location, but to my mind that's not really the right way to do it. If you leave them in the dark, you get very long, lanky, sickly looking shoots, and I want to produce nice, strong, stubby chits, and to do that you need to put them in reasonable light. They don't have to be in a bright sunny window or anything like that. They can just be in a room that's got a normal light level. It's absolutely fine. I think there's some debate over the merits of chitting potatoes, whether it's really necessary. And of course, if you just stick your tuber in the compost, it's going to grow whether it was chitted or not. For main crop potatoes, it probably doesn't make a huge difference. We do still tend to chit all of our potatoes before planting. But I think for the earliest harvests, it probably is beneficial to chit them first. And I can leave these at room temperature, and they're going to start into growth quite happily. Whereas if I put them down in the greenhouse now, it's going to take quite a while for them to get going. The temperature is quite low in there. And so I can keep them indoors for 2 or 3 weeks while they start to form their initial shoots, and then plant them out. They've got a head start, and I think that's probably important for us in order to get that early harvest we're looking for. We'll return to the potatoes in a few weeks' time when we plant them out. But for now, that's all. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.